Hi, welcome to episode 2 of Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Doom. That's me. And I am joined by two extraordinary young women that I have met in the last few years. One was my student and one was not. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you. So, Anna, would you please tell our listeners who you are?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ana. I'm a junior at Boston University studying political science and French. And I was super lucky to have Dr. Lynch my freshman year. And I'm the director of city affairs at BU, and I'm also a member of BU Votes.
Fantastic. And the listeners should know that Anna is one of those students who you have occasionally where you don't teach them anything. Hannah, would you please tell us all about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm a second year student at Northeastern studying political science and international affairs with minors in Spanish, law, and public policy. I am the executive director of communications for our student government, and this has put me as one of the student leaders in Northeastern Votes.
Fantastic. I'm so happy to have you both here. It's sort of worked out well that we could talk together. So before we jump into the conversation, there are two things I wanted to show you and show everyone. So let me share my screen. The first website is one that I think that all the voter groups that we're connected with can really publicize. And that's called csay2020.com. And this is where you go if you experience any form of voter intimidation or voter suppression when someone goes to vote. So csay2020.com, you go, you log the incident, and you can request immediate legal help. And so hopefully, this is something that we can all sort of spread around because it's an important website. But here's what I wanted to show you, and I'm sort of excited to show you because of the work that we've all been doing this year. And this is a website that shows you the early voting totals. And so almost 90 million people have voted early. And the statistic that I just saw is that in Texas, 109%. So they have 109% of the votes they had in 2016. So it is a literal tidal wave of early voting. And that, we don't know how the election is going to come out. But what that means is, at least to me, that the work that you have done, that we've done in Better Elections and people around the country have done is really, really paying off. Like I'm shocked by it. One of the things that has always been a source of frustration for me is the low voter turnout every year. And part of the problem is that we always end up having to pick the lesser of two evils, and that's silly. We shouldn't have to do that. But so anyway, it's been an astounding year. So Hannah, would you like to tell us first a little bit about the work that you've been doing at Northeastern and the kinds of events that you've done and all that sort of thing, so that people know what's been going on?
Of course. So we started out by just trying to engage students and getting them registered. Usually on campus, we're able to do that physically. So now we had to figure out what an online space looks like and what does tabling in a safe way with maybe a QR code look like, or having a big poster. So really trying to have a dynamic kind of engagement. And then outside of that, just educational opportunities. So a lot of the events that we have planned and a few upcoming ones will detail some historical tidbits about voting, what it looks like for different marginalized groups, as well as just some interesting topics that are on my mind as a political science student. There's one panel that we're going to have on populism around the world, like how does America compare to other countries, and getting a different perspective for students, because I feel like a large problem people see is polarization, but definitely starting to look at some of the systemic issues, as well as some of the things that are just like slipping by under the radar, such as populism. Like, what does that mean for someone who doesn't study political science? So really broadening our horizons and trying to have that engagement. And I think being online has definitely been a blessing in that we've been able to plan so many things and present so many different opportunities for students that have different interests.
And how have you seen a fairly good level of engagement?
I would say so. About each of the events we have been doing can have like 30 people, which is pretty decent for all the Zoom that we like in midterm week, that 30 kids would show up on a Thursday night is pretty impressive. as well as we've also been doing some things with the Boston Intercollegiate Government. This is a group of about 10 student governments in Boston working together. Anna's also a part of that, and we've planned some events together. And we had 160 students turn out for a town hall with Ed Markey, as well as his opponent O'Connor. So we've definitely been seeing some interest.
Oh, that's great. And it's really, you know, I would imagine that, or kind of what I've learned in working with students, is that there is a real desire to understand and to know, and there is a frustration that you've reached college and still no one has helped you figure this stuff out. And I totally get that, and I totally understand that frustration. Ana, do you want to talk to us about BU student government, BU votes, all of that, what we've been up to and doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest events that we put on this year was called Vote Big. And so that was led by BU Student Government, BU Votes, and then Boston Intercollegiate Government. And so what that looked like was 1 week in September, we had a voter campaign just to get people registered to vote and give them that information. So at BU, what it looked like is we held a cross-college competition. So all the colleges within BU, there was a competition for students to use BU's TurboVote account to either register to vote, check their registration, or check to see if they can get an absentee ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually this week we're giving out the prizes to the winning college, which was Sargent College at BU.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Sargent College. And then throughout the week, we also had speaker events. So we invited local councilwomen, we invited state representatives to speak. And at the end of the week, we had a professor panel about voter suppression that Dr. Lynch was on, and some other professors from around the Boston area. And it has to be noted as well that before these events, we did voter registration drives through Zoom. So we had a whole team set up to help students if they had any questions registering to vote before the drives. And at the end of our week, we actually registered at BU, we registered around 300 students to vote. So that was our really big push. And then after that week, BU Student Government, we've been working with Dean of Students to give every student living on campus a voting goodie bag. And so we actually created a flyer for 7,000 students on BU's campus with a QR code to our voter guide, which has all 50 states and has all the information and links about voting in that state, early voting, getting an absentee ballot. Along with stickers saying I voted, just some cute stickers that I think a lot of young students actually really like, especially in a year where a lot of things are vote by mail, that you get to have, you know, your fun I voted sticker. So those went out last week and they're being distributed this week around BU's campus.
Wow, that's so amazing. You guys keep blowing me away with all these wonderful things you're doing, and it is having impact. I mean, that's you know, and that's clear. That, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, excuse me, part of the issue in 2020 is that your generation has really suffered this year. And, you know, as I've said repeatedly, my students losing London was just like the worst, you know, I'll never get over that experience, really. And it's been such a sad year. But when you look at the, you know, people are standing in line for 8 hours to vote, and it's like, even with the voter suppression, you know, people are starting to fight back, and that makes such a difference. Like, for people who have been trying to get people up and moving and motivating, to finally see this happening is just like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm still sick to my stomach all the time, but you know, to see the students finally standing up is a wonderful thing. And one of the things that we should continue to talk about is, when this election is over, there's still a lot to do. And you know, what I would say is that the next goal is to keep everybody engaged when this election is over, because we need major reform, right? I mean, the whole system needs to be reformed. And people shouldn't have to wait for 8 hours to vote. That's ridiculous, you know. Or in Texas, having you know, one ballot box for the whole county, right? I mean, these things should not be allowed. And so what I hope that you guys can do, and I'm going to try to do when this is over, is make sure that people stay engaged, because now we have to really fix this system that's just a total mess. I didn't think to ask earlier, and I'd be interested to know from both of you, and Hannah, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and about how is it that you decided that you wanted to be involved in all of this? Like, where did that come from?
So my interest specifically on the topic of voting outside of like civic engagement broadly started last year. I am part of a research team that's called the Northeastern Environmental Justice Research Collaborative, and I was put as an editor on a voter suppression report. And so this was really my first introduction to kind of the overarching ways. So we talked about gerrymandering, felon disenfranchisement, Native American rights, and just a few like large topics that I was able to learn about what is like a restrictive ID law, or things to do with addresses. So some basic ways. And then I kind of worked on it throughout the summer as well as this semester and got deeper into it. And I realized I had the power to do things in my position as student government. And if we're not a pain in the butt for administration and we're not doing our job. So there's a lot of ways that I also realized like voter suppression takes place all around us. The fact that Northeastern, I spoke with their mail director, they only check mailboxes twice a week on campus. And I asked to check it more frequently as we're leading up and kids have mail-in ballots on the college campus. It is regular for everyone to have mail-in ballots. And they said no. And I was like, we're losing, I don't know how many ballots we're probably losing for freshmen who think they can put them in the blue mailbox in their dorm and it's not going to be checked in time to get to their states. So just those small ways that they're not willing to help once they know that there is a problem and that they're aware of it, that's voter suppression, and it's everywhere. And it's the small ways that we can start combating it. I think, like you mentioned, there's so much work moving forward. And I had the chance to speak with the chancellor this past week, and I listed off some of the ways. I was like, the fact students don't have stamps, that I had to go find funding from a department to then distribute it to students via residence life. Took me a month and a half to get that. Probably could have taken administration a week, knowing the connections I have and whatnot. So I feel there's definitely a lot of momentum to take advantage of. And there's a lot of issues we found, and that right now we could address them since everyone's really frenzied up about it in order to kind of have a better future for voting, especially just with local elections next year. I know in Boston it's mayoral elections, so and then we have midterms. So I think it'll definitely carry out.
Yeah, wow. That's really frustrating to hear that. Well, that's frustrating. Anna, how about you? Your background and all that.
Yeah, I think my background, I'm a political science student, so I've always been interested in politics and how the system works. And I think a lot of high school and the beginning of college for me was just education, just understanding the system and understanding its faults, and because that's not explicitly taught in high school at all. So I understand what you were talking about, frustration,
Right.
where you go from high school to college and you don't know fundamental things about how to vote, how to send a ballot, how to register to vote. So I think for the beginning, it was just a lot of education for me. And also I listened to a lot of political podcasts. So that was kind of eye-opening for me to start thinking about our system and the problems with it. And then this past summer, I was lucky enough to be chosen to be director of city affairs. And so this was kind of the first time where I was given full reign over a department in student government, given resources, given support. And I wanted to use that opportunity to help with voting. I was like, there's no other project that I could have done. I needed to talk about voting. I needed to do a project about voting. And that's just how I felt about it. And so really it's been a learning process for me of how to use my interest and my passion for politics and start thinking about the world and actually finding a place where I can use my voice, start working on projects, and get all of that done. And so it's really been a learning process for me. And then also now in my position, making connections with people on campus, administration, but also getting students involved. But I completely understand what Hannah was saying about some frustration with administration. I've definitely felt the same way. There's definitely been a lot of, I feel like on its face, a lot of the administrators are excited and happy that students are talking about voting, but when you ask them for concrete help or steps, then it does take a month-long process of back and forth emails in order to get anywhere. So it has been a long process, a learning process for me, but it's been a really fulfilling process as well.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that if this is not work that you've done, when you do it, you find it's like you literally feel filled with like this civic spirit, which you didn't even know actually exists, right? Because unfortunately, and this is something that Anna, you'll remember me talking about in class, there's this huge mix-up between nationalism and patriotism, and they are not the same thing, right? Nationalism is hatred, patriotism is love, and patriotism is love of your fellow citizens, right? And your the family that we're all supposed to belong to. And we, somewhere along the lines, we went off in the nationalist direction, and that ends up in the dead end of Trump with hatred and fear and COVID, apparently. Let me ask you both this, and whoever can start, go ahead. One of the things, so I'll be 50 in April 28th, by the way, and I do take birthday bribes. One of the things that I have noticed among people my age in the last several years is just demoralization. Like everyone just feels very demoralized. Is that what you notice among people your age, or is it disengagement, or is it engagement, or what? How would you characterize before, like when you get started with all of this? Maybe it's different now, but like what did you find? Disengagement, demoralization, interest? What was out there?
I think that, like, for me personally, demoralization is my worst fear of like what can happen to my generation.
Yeah.
I felt like right now, and with the people I've worked with, there is a lot of passion and drive for us to make it better. And I think that like a lot of my generation has seen millennials and seen them been crushed by economic recessions, and we've seen a lot of them become like apathetic. And I think that our generation has pushed back against that, using new ways, using technology, using TikTok. Like, I'm sorry, Trump, I'm sorry, older people who don't use it,
Yeah.
but we are, I think, we are communicating with each other more and more so. And I think that, in my experience, a lot of people have been interested in wanting to work towards voting, but my biggest fear is that people will get demoralized and become apathetic if all the hard work we put in doesn't come to fruition. And so I think that's my greatest fear. Right now, I'm not seeing it. I see a lot of people who are active and engaged, but again, with the coming election and all the elections that precede that and our system, I am frankly worried that we will get to the point of demoralization. But I'm really hoping that our generation can break that mold and just keep pushing for work and reform, even though it is a lot and it's taxing.
I'm glad that you mentioned the millennials, because I watched them get crushed, and it was the most awful thing I've ever seen. Because they were great kids. They are great kids. Well, they're kids to me, even though they're in their 30s now. And I also agree that kind of you guys came along and you were the reinforcements in a sense. And I really, really, really think that the Zoomers took this really seriously, because I'm guessing that watching the millennials get destroyed had a huge impact on you. Hannah, what did you want to add to that, if anything?
The first thing, my birthday is April 30th, and I'll be 20. So sometimes, definitely, I believe that one of the things that students have, like the only reason that they're not passionate is because they don't know.
Yeah.
And so going back to what Anna said about education, once they do know, there is that sense of like, you could feel upset. Well, there's so much frustration and so much like built up, like, why is this happening? That students aren't demoralized, they're just enraged. And I feel like that's definitely what we've been pushing on. And the fact that we're seeing a lot of barriers right now, despite the outcome, I think that will definitely, having that long-term goal. For example, Northeastern tried getting the election day off as a holiday. We got rejected. Students are angry. And it's a good thing, because I know that's something that we'll have as a goal, because we all pulled together right now and we can still stay together after this. And I think that's going to be really powerful. And I think students just want to see the change,
Yeah.
and I think we have enough momentum to keep it.
Yeah, I hope. And I also think that, on the school level, all right. So the position that I've always been in for the last however many years I've been teaching is trying to get my students to understand that you have way more power than you realize, like way more, right? And so all you need to do is start using it, right? And so at Northeastern, at BU, but then with the country as a whole, like if you just would start using the power that you actually have, no one can stop you. You can't be stopped, right? And I think that along with all the reform that we need, one of the things that you guys can do, or these organizations can do, is to start pushing the people who will run for office to get, to be in the mindset to do that. Because there's so many offices where you only have to be 21 or 25 or whatever, and that is within reach. And so that's the other thing too. It's like, identifying the people of your generation who can stand up and who can, lead and put us on a better path. Because the Reagan Revolution has been a catastrophe, and this is where it ended up. And I like you. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I feel enormous frustration because I want Joe Biden to win every electoral vote, but I don't like Joe Biden. He's a neoliberal, right? And I can't believe that we're still stuck with these people, but we are. But here's the good thing. Everyone, including Joe Biden, knows that no one is voting for Joe Biden. Everyone is voting against Trump. Trump is the only motivator in this election. Joe Biden is irrelevant. Joe Biden could be a scarecrow, and people will vote Scarecrow Harris. It doesn't matter at this point. So this is a unique position for your generations to be in. Let me say why. He will have enormous like political capital, but he himself will be very weak. So your generations can put enormous pressure on him because he can use that capital and he can't really resist you because you're the people that made him president. So keep that in mind. There's an awful lot of pressure that your generations can bring to bear if you try. And the process will be just identifying the people who will get out there and really best apply that pressure, if that makes sense. We're rapidly coming to the end of our time together. I wanted to ask each of you, even though I have this reputation as Dr. Doom, which is totally fair, I just asked my mom, what is for each of you, I'd love to hear, like, what is something wonderful about this whole experience that you've encountered? Either something specific or something general that, you got involved in this and you felt the spirit, you felt the, what you're supposed to feel when you're doing good work. Was there anything like that you can tell us about, like some incident or moment of like, wow, this is really, either of you have something like that?
Yeah, I think for me, it really came at the end of Vote Big when I got the results from Dean of Students that we had registered 300 people.
Yeah.
And for me, that number was so meaningful. Even if it was lower, even if it was higher, it was 300 individual lives that like my work, that like my team's work that we had done, that we had actually motivated and helped 300 people, gotten 300 more votes. And so I think that for me was really touching, especially because with Zoom, it's hard to get people as engaged, and to see that like our work, even though maybe not as many people came to the Zoom events as we hoped, that we were actually affecting people, that we were actually helping them and making an impact. And so I think that for me really validated a lot of my work. And it just, I just was really surprised and like thankful that like me, like as a student at BU as a junior, that I was like able to affect 300 lives and actually like help them vote. And so I think that for me was like really significant.
It is unbelievable. Like what I've said to my students is when you click into helping other people, you can't believe how addicting it is. It's such a great driving force. It really is. That's great. Hannah, what about you?
I would say it's been the process of working with other schools in order to work on the election day holiday resolution.
Yeah.
So just being able to see the momentum at other schools, have meetings with students from whether it's like BU, Harvard, MIT, and all just collaborating and saying, what are you doing? Like, how can we be helping and be supporting each other? Like, it's not just something at our schools. Like you said, we have so much more power, and seeing people start to pull together and start to support another has been really motivating and just inspiring to know you have not just the support of some of your peers, you have the support of like thousands and thousands of students behind you that are all at your disposal. They're all ready to work with you and take action. So it's just been really nice because it is demoralizing work, but just banding together has really helped keep us alive at this point. It's been a long semester.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been. This has been the longest year I've ever experienced. And it's been the longest 4 years. The only thing I can say about the last 4 years, though, is that, well, knock on wood, everything seems to indicate that Trump will be smashed in the election. And if the process of him being smashed means that your generations learned the lessons that you will never forget, it might be worth it. You know, like if this is sort of the dead end that we reached and he self-destructs and brings the Republicans down with him, then we can start over. Yes, we're standing in the middle of rubble, but we can start over. And what I would suggest in all sincerity and seriousness is that the millennials and the Zoomers, you need to start your own party and you need to ignore everyone over the age of 40. Just ignore them because we led you to ruin, right? And why would you listen to us? Well, I mean, listen to me because I know what I was talking about, but you know, the rest of them. So, you know, hopefully what I'm hoping and what I hope we could all continue to do together when the election is over is really sort of push the civic nature onto the students of your age and really get them ready to go because we have so much more to fight for at this point. The system has failed. It needs to be fixed, and it can be. And I think the only way that that happens is motivating millennials and Zoomers. I really do. I think that's the only way. And so that's, I think, you know, we have quite a task, you know, now that we're all exhausted from this election. And then it's like, okay, you know, you can have 12 hours to relax and then, you know, you have to go back to fighting. So, well, my coffee is gone. So I guess our time is gone too. I cannot thank you enough. I'm so impressed with both of you. I'm so happy to get to work with both of you. We still have lots to do and we'll keep going. So on behalf of myself and Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Doom, thank you both. Be safe. I know we're going to talk on election day or after. I'm sure we will. And I'll be seeing you soon. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
No,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for having us.
Yeah.